What do you expect? How do you expect the war to go for Ukraine over the next 6 months, for instance?
It is difficult to predict for such a long period of time, but of course we plan combat operations, we plan campaigns, we make appropriate calculations of our capabilities, the capabilities of the armed forces, our needs. And of course, we are committed to victory. And the help of our partners, our allies, would help us a lot. It would help us a lot if all restrictions on the use of weapons on the territory of the Russian Federation against military targets, I repeat, not against the civilian population, against military targets were lifted. The planned deliveries of weapons and equipment would allow us to bring our new brigades, which have already been formed and are in the process of being formed, into service as soon as possible. Of course, this would have an impact on the overall level of our capabilities. That's how I see it. That is, only in the fight can we win, and we are all determined to win. And again, the Kursk operation showed that victory is the incentive that boosts the morale of our military and our entire population. That's the only way to do it and no other way. I believe that Russia is trying to force us to give up and break our will to resist by hitting our civilian objects and damaging civilian infrastructure. By targeting our civilians in this way, they are trying to break our will to win.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I am Brian Lusk. Thanks for joining me to this very fine evening here. It's been a busy couple of days over there in Ukraine. I think that's true every single time. So I thought that intro that we put together right there, some very interesting things there. For one thing, the quote from Ronald Reagan, it has been said that of all the virtues, courage is the most important. Because without it, we would never have the strength to practice the others. And I have to say that I do believe that we're seeing that in practice before our very eyes. Without courage, the courage to face the enemy in the most horrific way possible. Without that courage, no other virtue matters at all. So let's go ahead and take a look here. I've got a bunch of things going on here. Glad to see Al, Ozzy, and Lucille this evening. The Ozzy, I can't really answer that question in detail. The general numbers I've heard, and this is just kind of grabbing at some numbers here, is roughly within 100 miles of the Ukraine border, and that they're able to strike targets within that range. Now, that could be 100 kilometers. It may be other numbers entirely. I'll see if I can kind of pull something together on that and get you some information. But overall, it is just pretty confusing. And I can imagine that Ukraine's pretty confused too. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. I know that by and large, the intent is that Ukraine would be able to strike supply convoys and attacking forces that are coming across from Russia to prevent them from being able to attack Ukraine itself. So, you can kind of start piecing together from the context what we're to expect. But as far as the introduction goes, I'm going to go ahead and continue on. I think that the video showing the partisans at work within Russia and in other Russian occupied areas was particularly powerful. And then with Alexander Syrsky, General Syrsky, giving his thoughts. That is exactly what Russia's plan seems to be, to destroy Ukraine's people, civilians, until they sue for peace. And this is, I go right back to the Battle of Britain, as the Brits were bombed, day in, day out by the Germans. There was, they were stronger for it. Keep calm and carry on. So will Ukraine be able to do the same thing? I don't know. But I'll tell you, regardless, it is something to watch. Now let's go ahead and move on to this bit from Anton Herischenko here. Let me go ahead and bring it up. There we go. By all indications, Putin has decided to fight with the civilian population of Ukraine, realizing that he cannot fully win on the battlefield. Therefore, he is going to attack cities with drones and missiles as much as possible, deliberately striking residential buildings, hospitals, educational institutions, and civilian infrastructure. This is done so Ukrainian people become too frightened and morally exhausted, so they start demanding negotiations from Ukrainian leaders because it's impossible to go on like this. I think we should expect more strikes on civilian objects because terrorist Putin believes that he will achieve his goals this way. In addition, he is well aware that each destruction of infrastructure facilities makes the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine more difficult and longer, delaying economic recovery and the return of the people. Ukrainians are holding on. But it is becoming increasingly difficult to survive in these inhumane conditions. We are exhausted and depleted. Ukraine is grateful to our allies for their help. The best support for Ukrainians is to enable us to destroy the Russian war machine. This is also one of the ways to close the skies over Ukraine. Although Ukrainium is the strongest element on the planet, as you sometimes write in the comments, even it gets worn down by daily trials. Let's go ahead and move on to an interesting situation that's kind of, we're going to just say it's ongoing at this point in time. And that is that over the last couple of days, there's been a strike of a Russian drone in Romania and in Latvia. So let's talk about those for a few moments here. At least one Russian drone of Iranian production, Shahed 136, violated NATO airspace, crossing the Romanian border from Vlhkova, Odessa Oblast towards Novodari, that place. It violated Romanian airspace from approximately 2:40 to 3:30 a.m. It flew more than 70 kilometers from the border towards Razim Lake, and then it exited over the Black Sea. The Romanian Air Force lifted F-16s from the ground, but did not shoot down the drone. The most likely reason was to protect civilians. The Russian drone flew over populated areas. When the first drone crashed, we don't need to talk about that, but this is the situation. They're waiting for a firm reaction from their allies. When will we wake up and realize we are at war? Then there was the Russian military drone that crashed in the eastern part of Latvia. They're doing an investigation on this one. It's unusual, but if you pay close attention to your geography, which I had to take a look, Latvia is not towards Ukraine. In fact, you have to go over all of Belarus to get a Russian Shahed drone to hit Latvia. What was it doing in Latvia? That's NATO territory. And that's just one more test that Vladimir Putin is doing. He is trying to see where NATO will finally say no more. And the problem is, so far NATO has been asleep. Incidents unthinkable 3 years ago are now treated as routine. Nothing should be landing on Ukraine or Latvia or anywhere on NATO territory. But this is the new reality our inaction has allowed to emerge. Lithuania will, of course, be supporting a strong Allied response. Now, this is the Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs here. He is calling for a response, a real response. We'll have to see if NATO does. The Russian drone impacted in the eastern parts of Latvia, and this is after a string of Russian drones and missiles crossing over into NATO space, such as in Poland and Romania. This is becoming a pattern. Or as Ryan Macbeth would say, this is what we call a clue. And it's clear to me that Russia is deliberately trying to provoke. As Andrei Sybiha has stated, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, a stark reminder that Russia's aggressive actions extend beyond Ukraine. Allies' collective response must be maximum support for Ukraine now to put an end to Russian aggression, protect lives, and keep Europe at peace. I have had this conversation many times. Russia, anytime there is a peace agreement, if they have made any progress at all, that's just an invitation for the next war. They did it in Chechnya. They did it in Georgia. They've done it in several other places since the 90s. If there is not a strong, powerful response and then a following build up from the party that was attacked to prevent the Russians from coming in again, then Russia will return. They'll return stronger and better and with more meat waves and whatever they've got to do to get their goals done. Or as Ivana Strodner states, Putin has been trying to show that NATO is a paper tiger. Not only did the Romanian Air Force not shoot down Russian drones in their airspace, they escorted them with F-16s for over 100 kilometers. Come on. Those things need to be taken down. Of course, Belarus is an ally of Russia in this. At least 8 drones entered Belarus at night. One Shahed was 70 kilometers from the border with Lithuania. This is the night of September 6th through 7th. The drones are obviously making use of Belarusian airspace, and of course, Lukashenko is not saying anything about that. However, he is claiming that this is a provocation by Ukrainian provocateurs. So, why is Russian drones in Belarusian airspace a Ukrainian provocation? Well, he's trying to test the waters, see if he can come up with an excuse. Well, honestly, I think he's trying to come up with an excuse not to get involved. He wants to do just enough saber rattling to keep Vladimir Putin happy and sending him weapons and money. But let's cut to the chase. His situation in Belarus is so tenuous right now. If he ordered his military to go to war, he might find his civilians rising up instead. Either way, this is a scary situation for Lukashenko. He's been kind of talking about this, and every time he does, things get worse for him. And of course, Vladimir Putin pressures him to do more. So who would save Belarus? Well, certainly not Vladimir Putin. Another big story that's come out over the last several days, and the sources that I've got on this are the ones that are from a very specific perspective. However, I've been looking at this overall. This just happens to be the ones that came up during my research of for this broadcast here. There was a story that released just the other day. The Department of Justice for the United States released, I believe it was a 277-page indictment of Tenet Media. Now, Tenet Media was run by Lauren Chin. She had brought in several conservative podcasters and influencers under the Tenet Media umbrella. And she had taken over $10 million in Russian funds to push a particular viewpoint. One of the individuals who, now I have to state this for the record, the Department of Justice describes those who worked with Tenet Media as victims of a crime. not as perpetrators of a crime, meaning that the money that, as far as they knew, was coming from tenant media, not from a shady Russian source. So you can look at what they did and probably had conversations about what they were supposed to talk about and how they did. The thing is that some of these did some pretty hard turns in order to start talking negatively about Ukraine and positively about Russia. Tim Pool has never been particularly favorable to Ukraine, but he was one of the ones involved. He went very hard against Ukraine around the time the money started flowing. And by the way, so we have some perspective here. Apparently, he was getting $100,000 per episode to talk about this. That's $400,000 a month. Not exactly chump change. So on top of that, on top of this tenant media, the Department of Justice has also uncovered about 2,800 people on various social media platforms who are also caught up in this situation between paid assets, as people are saying, or people who are just influencers who have been caught up by this Russian disinformation campaign. 600 of these are in the U.S. that they have identified so far. Also, they have noted that there are multiple of these types of operations going on. And so this is just one of these. So that's why we've got this situation going on. The truth is that Russia is at war with the U.S. The U.S. only considers it war if somebody's bombing or shooting us, personally. Not that they are engaging in this type of influence operation, this disinformation operation in aggressive manner against us. Or as Aussie states here, this would be like Tokyo Rose. Absolutely. They were paid to take a very specific, take on a very specific viewpoint. Some of them might have gotten there anyway. In fact, some of them have said that they had full editorial control over their content and that they had no indications that they were to have specific viewpoints, and therefore they may have been broadcasting exactly what they believe. And that's okay. What's not okay is taking huge amounts of money from Russia for it. And that's where things are going to get kind of murky at this point in time. Some have already indicated that they are rolling over for the Department of Justice. Others are being very defiant. Of course, Tim Pool, being a bit of a stir of pots, has already gone on and his Twitter account and declared, "Oh, I've seen everything now. I'm totally wrong about Ukraine. Obviously, now I'm totally on board with taking care of Ukraine." And it's just him stirring the pot. That's the type of person he is. There are other personalities involved. I'm not going to go into them. I didn't watch them myself. I did, in fact, watch Tim Pool at various points before he went off the deep end's the wrong word, but you can see the moment when the money got him. And at that point, I was out of there. Not that I particularly was favorable or disfavorable to what he said. I listened to lots of viewpoints. But this is the Russian disinformation operation here. Some of the others that were caught up in this were Lauren Southern, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson. These are fairly major influencers in conservative circles. We've already seen indications that Tucker Carlson and others like him had been caught up in these influence operations, even if let's just say they were motivated to take the viewpoints. they may have already had those viewpoints to start with. So I just want to clear that up, that just because they are speaking about this, they've been speaking about this way and are caught up in this, doesn't mean they didn't believe that in the first place. Or as Igor Sushko here states, Americans who accepted millions of dollars from Russia to regurgitate Kremlin propaganda are victims, according to Senator Rubio here, who was talking about it. So take your pick on what you believe. $10 million to take the Kremlin perspective. What are your principles worth? Donald Trump did kind of do the whole, oh, Russia, Russia, Russia again. And you know what? The thing is that there is indications that the Democrats have taken that perspective for some time. They've been doing the boy who cried wolf for so long. Doggone it. You know, what can I say? The thing is that when the wolf really does show up, we need to recognize it. And that's what I think we're seeing here, is that some of these people were taken in by the wolf and became the wolf pack. The indictment identified the name of the operation as Project Good Old USA. Very much a throwback type of a definitely pulling at the conservative mindset of a better time, a better era, throwing back on that thought process. But they throw back on that thought process without really thinking about it. For instance, we spent a lot of years in the 50s, 60s, and 70s hiding under desks in schools because we were afraid that there would be a nuke dropping on our heads. Things have changed. But Vladimir Solovyev, who is one of the Putin's propagandists here, said that the MAGA people that got caught up in this should seek Russian asylum. Yeah, that would really look good for them. Or as Dmitry at War Translated states, Putin would not be paying $400,000 a month to influencers if he was winning. But in the end, how you feel about this is going to depend a lot about on your perspective. I was entirely unsurprised. I saw a lot of it happening. And I just assumed, now the one thing I did is I assumed that these people were being genuine about their viewpoints. And I just couldn't get on board. As Tyndar states, Russia's war against the West didn't start with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. It started the day Putin entered the Kremlin. Putin uses the methods of a KGB agent. It was, for many, invisible. He only used the military occasionally, but if you cared, it was quite obvious from the beginning. This Russia under Putin is the enemy. YouTube did finally respond and eliminated Tenet Media. There's still the other, the sub-influencers underneath Tenet Media are still, as far as I understand, platformed. Go for it. I don't have a problem with that. But Tenet Media itself, with Lauren Chin, who was the one who definitely knew where the money was coming from, that was actually taken down. But, you know, if you want Lauren Chin's information and her articles and her commentary, Russia Today's got you covered. Or as John Kirby states, there is no doubt the Kremlin is using propaganda and disinformation to sow discord among the U.S. population. So yeah, that's the whole bit about paid assets. There's going to be a lot more about this coming up. I'm sure I'll try and keep on top of it. But overall, that's the situation. Tenet Media was effectively an arm of Russian propaganda. There were influencers underneath Tenet Media that may or may not have known the source of the money. We do know that the amount of due diligence they performed was, shall we say, lacking. Though, to their credit, I do know that at least one of them attempted to do some due diligence on this and was generally fooled. But still. Let's go ahead and move on to the Dragon drones, which, if you've watched carefully, you've seen a lot of this going on lately. This is a drone that's using thermite to burn out positions of cover that the Russians have taken. So what happens is, and I'm kind of give you the high-level overview of it. Many of you already are familiar with thermite. It's an iron oxide and aluminum powder mixture that can burn up to about 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 2,200 degrees Celsius. This is of course, it probably gets hotter too. So, but this mixture was used during the Cold War to destroy classified documents. And the way you would use it is you would have, if you had a safe full of classified documents, you'd take the thermite grenade, you'd pull the pin, you'd put it on top of the safe, and it would burn straight through the safe from top to bottom and on out. There was nothing that could stand in the way of a thermite grenade. But anyway, they fly these over, they trigger them right before they get to the tree line or whatever position they want to, and the damage can be extensive. The temperatures will trigger artillery shells and ammunition, causing the whole area to begin exploding with anything that's been stored in that area. The effects on plants and animal life are horrendous, to say the least. And on humans, even more so. That's why thermite is not to be used against civilians, ever, along with any other incendiary. It is certainly allowed for use in military applications, but it should never be used against the civilian population. This is the damage from one of basically one of these incendiary drones. Understand, this probably didn't get hit directly by it, except for maybe in little bits. This was probably burned by all the things around it that caught fire. So you can see that that this position of concealment that the Russians had prepared no longer was able to perform its duties and was basically burned out. And that's the latest tool that Ukraine is using, thermite drones. Of course, there's lots of other interesting things that Ukraine's doing with drones. In fact, they have been using them to intercept these super cam drones, which are like hundreds of thousands of dollars. These are the surveillance drones the Russians have been using. A cheap couple of $100, $500 FPV drone comes and takes out a super cam drone. That is a serious return on investment right there. The destruction of expensive Russian surveillance drones with cheap FPV drones is one of the best cost-benefit ratios one can imagine, especially when considering how rare those reconnaissance drones are. In that case, this was a Russian Merlin VR, which was worth several hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, I did see somewhere, and I haven't confirmed it, but that there was an intercept of a drone at 3,600 meters. That'd be times 3, 9, about 10,000 feet. Actually, a little bit higher than that. How they got a drone up, one of those little drones up that high, there must have been some additional things going on. But they managed to intercept something at about 3,600 meters using some kind of a drone mix. And so it's clear that Ukraine is just putting it all in there to try and get these surveillance drones taken out. And the truth is, the surveillance drones are more important than the strike drones in many ways, because the surveillance drones are the ones that tell Russia where the Ukrainians are. Let's go ahead and move it to the news out of Ukraine. Had a lot of stuff on kind of an intro area there. Hope you appreciate some of that stuff there as well. A MiG-29, a Ukrainian MiG-29, destroyed 2 Shahed drones during a recent night attack. And let me see this one. I'm not going to turn the volume on because they've almost all got music that's copyrighted. But that's an air-to-air missile impacting and destroying a Shahed drone. Pretty nice. According to intelligence chief Budanov, Ukraine has drones that can now reach Russian military targets at a distance of up to 1,800 kilometers. Military airfields, which are a source of constant threat to peaceful Ukrainian cities, shudder from air attacks. The entire infrastructure of Russia, working for the war, has suffered and will suffer losses. They're getting more distance day by day. The Russians, however, also are working on the same thing. They tried to target the Verkhovna Rada building in Kyiv. That's basically their parliament building, or the equivalent of our house, our Congress, basically. They tried to hit it with a Shahed drone. They did find the debris, but they've need to work on their accuracy, basically. They didn't hit the building. Still, the Ukrainians are forced to evacuate from various parts of the front lines. In this case, Donetsk region. 9 civilians and 4 dogs successfully evacuated. Ukrainians are suffering greatly from having to leave their homes, family, and friends. They hate the war unleashed by Russia and Putin. According to President Zelensky, in just 1 week of September, Russia used more than 800 guided aerial bombs, almost 300 Shahed drones, more than 60 missiles of various types against our people. Terror can be reliably stopped in only one way: by strikes on Russian military airfields, on their bases, on the logistics of Russian terror. We must achieve this. From Build, Ukraine develops a 3-stage plan to destroy Russian Shahed drones, kamikaze quadcopters, aircraft-type kamikaze drones, and drones against Shahed loitering munitions. In other words, having some loitering drones up in the air, just waiting for the next Shahed swarm to come through, and they can drop them on top of them. Kind of like right out of World War II. If you were trying to escort bombers over Berlin, your escort would be above you, or the enemy would try and get above you before you arrived, and therefore the escort and the enemy fighters would end up having to tangle it out above the bombers and try and prevent each other from carrying out their missions. Russian POWs held in Ukraine are no longer allowed to call relatives, and there's a reason for this, which I did not link here. The reason is because there was yet several more incidents of Ukrainian POWs, prisoners on the battlefield, being shot down in cold blood by Russian troops. They surrendered, and the Russians killed them anyway. Ukraine is building weapons underground to supply the military with arms in the event of delays in military aid from abroad. This makes perfect sense. Underground is a lot more protected than above-ground facilities, and to be honest, with as flaky as the Allies have been in this, they need to make all the preparations they need to. Ukraine is developing its own precision-guided bomb, which is expected to become a key weapon for strikes against Russia. It's based on, or resembles is a better word, the French Hammer bomb, and has a range of up to 65 kilometers and is GPS guided. If they make them themselves, no restrictions. Just saying. A Ukrainian pilot did die while flying an F-16, and the F-16 was lost. He did manage to shoot down 2 Russian missiles with the aircraft's onboard weapons and was attacking a 3rd cruise missile. It's still under investigation as to exactly what happened. So that's sad news for Ukraine. Moving on to the news out of Russia real quick here. The Ukrainian Armed Forces struck a fuel storage site in Belgorod region. You can see this going through here. Hang on a second. Let me mute this because there's no reason to get all that noise in there. The incident occurred in the Volokonovsky district, according to local residents in the village of Yutanovka. They also struck a massive munitions depot in Voronezh region. They state, the Russians always state, of course, that they managed to intercept and suppress these drones. Amazing how often those suppressed and destroyed drones just happen to land on oil and munitions facilities. Of course, the one in Voronezh actually had stockpiles of North Korean KN-23 ballistic missiles, which have a range of 900 kilometers. So the destruction of those, very useful for Ukraine. Still, the Russians like to celebrate their invasion of Ukraine. They've put up a new monument in Khimki, Moscow. So clearly, they're intending to absolutely market the special military operation in Ukraine. Noted Russian opposition leader Igor Strelkov-Gherkin has volunteered to go and fight on the front lines in Ukraine. There's a pretty good possibility that, considering his persona non grata status, that he will not live to fight very long. A train depot in Zelenohrad, Moscow was on fire. This thing was pretty darn extensive, and my understanding is it took out several engines and some other electric facilities in this area. A freight train derailed in St. Petersburg. No word on if there's, enemy action involved or partisan action. Still, it's just one more train that's been knocked out. The former Deputy Minister of Emergency Situations, Pavel Barashev, has been arrested for fraud. Now, he's been out since 2021, so this is old charges. Seems kind of odd, but that's okay because they've got to have somebody to pin the blame on. Those are fish in Kamchatka, Russia. The truck is spilling fish on the roadway. Can you imagine being behind that mess? Ugh. This is another ammunition warehouse in Soldatskoye, Voronezh. Still burning. This is as of several days ago now, so maybe it'll done. The fire's out by now. But look at how extensive the fires in this area are. Likely the whole installation was lost with all goods involved. I already talked about that one already. This is some closer video of it to give you kind of an idea of that train depot in the Zelenohrad area, what kind of destruction was caused there. Kind of moving a little bit less visceral for a moment or two. Russians are complaining about artillery charges that all come from different sources and have different gunpowder weights, leading to much worse accuracy. Why can't you hit anything? Because we were brought 10 shells from 6 different places. The powder weight distribution is different for everyone. Each shell has its own shot calculation. Western equipment tends to be done to exacting standards and quality assurance. Russian and obviously North Korean and Iranian, not so much. But don't worry, the Chinese have a lot of cars to sell you if they don't catch fire first. A machine factory in Tolyatti, Russia is on fire. This is as of yesterday. The plant had produced Russian war goods, so that's yet another one. This one's kind of an interesting little aside here. We kind of talked about this some months ago. According to Ukraine, Russians are transporting Crimean treasures to Moscow. And this appears to have kind of picked up the pace. More than 10 million cultural valuables have already been moved, and there's an application for the evacuation of museum collections to Russia. So overall, it's clear that Russia's gotten to the point of looting the place. That's really all there is to it. Then there was this. Russia had another election of sorts, not for president, but kind of more their routine elections here. Reports of mining, meaning like bombs, at polling stations in 2 cities of Crimea, but there were no mines found. The Institute for the Study of War talked about the situation in the Kursk Oblast, and the reason it's not in my Kursk section is because this is kind of the broader implications here. Now, Budanov said that they did cause Russia to redeploy forces to Kursk that were intended for their offensive operations. And overall, the situation appears that they've really had to focus, Russia has really had to focus on the Pokrovsk area entirely. Other areas of the front might get a little bit frisky every once in a while, but overall, they're relatively quiet now. That's because they've had to redirect some of their forces in chunks, the pieces, to Kursk in order to try and slow down Ukraine in that area. It's definitely a black eye for Russia. This is old information from back in August. This is new satellite images showing the damage inflicted on Marinovka Air Base in the Volgograd region back on August 22nd. 4 aircraft shelters, support buildings, and antenna fairing and open storage areas, and 3 additional aircraft shelters were damaged. No telling what was in those shelters at this time. And we'll end off the Russia section with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov claiming that the ongoing issue is not about territories and that Russia never wanted someone else's land. He stated that Russia seeks humane treatment for people who are part of the so-called Russian world. I'm just going to point out that they have said that Russia has no borders. That's all I'm going to say. All right, well, let's move on to the international part here. In fact, before I do that, I'm going to quickly take a just moment to get a drink of water here, kind of wet the old whistle here. But don't worry, I won't be long. All right, I'm back. See, that was real fast, real simple. By the way, I am so thankful for all of you that are here tonight. I know that things have been a little bit extra spotty lately, but every time I know that I can rely on you guys to be here. So thank you. Let's go ahead and go on to the international news here. Some Indian citizens fighting in Ukraine on Russia's side are being withdrawn from the front and sent home. I suspect that India has thrown a bit of a hissy fit over that. But either way, interesting to see. The National Security Commission of the Iranian parliament admitted to supplying missiles to Russia. The Iranian Foreign Ministry denied it outright. Now, the word is that Iran supplied about 200 ballistic missiles to Russia to fire at Ukraine. Not an endless supply, but the Iranians initially said, we didn't do it. Nope, we didn't supply anything to Russia. Not a thing. And then, of course, they got into a little bit of a sparring match between various ministries over there and got their wires crossed. It's pretty clear that Iran has already sent those missiles to Russia. The UK is giving some additional assistance on air defense. These are the about 650 lightweight multi-role missiles for air defense. They've only got a range of about 6 kilometers, which is pretty short. But if you can get them positioned along the path where you expect Shahed drones, should do a pretty good job. A Russian school in West London has been teaching its pupils how to assemble guns and throw grenades as part of a strict anti-Western curriculum. They're doing it anywhere they can. They want to cause havoc anywhere they can. A heavily publicized anti-drone system adopted by the Russian National Guard turns out to have been smuggled in from China and apparently falsely represented as Russian by its supplier. At least one person has been charged in Russia for weapons smuggling. And I'd have to say that the reason they're getting charged is because they didn't bring in something that was worth actually using. Now, this is moving outside of Ukraine and Russia for just a moment. From Spencer Hakiminian, never mind, I'm just not on my game today. The biggest story in the world right now is China. Everything else is secondary. The last time China was deflating this hard, it was 3% of global GDP. Now it is 20% of global GDP. You can see the chart here shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters in a row of negative decline. Sorry, decline. Interesting. And if China's in financial straits, it might find that the whole Russia-Ukraine war is something they want to have end now. Also, outside of the Russia-Ukraine war, the U.S. and Iraq have reached an understanding on the withdrawal of U.S.-led coalition forces from Iraq. The plan would see hundreds of troops leave by September 2025 and the rest by the end of 2026. I'm not going to go into the whole thread here. I'll just paste it for you to take a look at your leisure. The U.S. has detected increased Russian military activity around key undersea cables and believes Russia may now be more likely to carry out potential sabotage aimed at disabling a critical communications infrastructure. Now, they could do it without, they'd want to time it for something that would make it the most chaos and trouble. If you did it at a random time, we just fire up some satellites and get around it. The thing is that what's the plan? That's what I have to ask. The U.S. administration has announced another substantial military aid package for Ukraine with Bradleys, M113 APCs, RIM-7 missiles, Stinger missiles, HIMARS ammunition, 155 and 105 millimeter artillery ammunition, TOW missiles, Javelins, AT-4s, MRAPs, small arms ammunition and grenades, patrol boats, maritime training equipment, demolitions equipment and munitions, spare parts, etc., etc., etc. So that's another assistance package from the U.S. Germany's going to provide 12 more Panzerhaubitze 2000 SPGs as well. They should also get 77 Leopard 1A5s from European allies. Overall, the Leopard 1 is old gear, 50, 60 years old. It brings a gun to the fight, but it also brings old technology. There were good tanks back in the 60s and stuff like that. I'm not saying otherwise. And if all you need is something that's going to bring a gun to the fight, 100% you're going to get it with the Leopard 1. It's still not exactly the latest gear. Though, who knows? They might stick a bunch of little ERA blocks on it and slat armor and all kinds of stuff like that. German Eurofighter Typhoons are this is as of 4 days ago. We're escorting the Ukrainian president through German airspace to the Ramstein meeting. That's just really, really cool. I already kind of talked about this in other areas, so I'm going to move on. Portugal just successfully donated 6 Kamov Ka-32 multi-role helicopters to Ukraine. So the last one left 2 days ago and should be in Ukraine on Friday. They've already got experience with this type. They can use them as utility birds. Who knows? Maybe they'll get creative and arm them too. Who knows? Here's where Chancellor Scholz starts getting a little bit weak in the knees here. Olaf Scholz is in favor of Russia's participation in the next peace summit. The overall situation that I've been seeing from other sources is that it's likely that Scholz is going to push Ukraine to try and get them to give up some territory to Russia so that they can get a peace agreement inked and in the books. That didn't work so well for Chechnya or Georgia. Just going to say that. The tragedy of Russia's war against the West is that it's only happening because the West refuses to admit it's happening. Let that stand on its own. Germany did announce 17 more Iris-T air defense systems that they'll be sending to Ukraine. That's pretty good news. And the European Union will allocate 300 million euros from the frozen Russian assets and buy French weapons to send to Ukraine. Lithuania is getting a little bit nervous. They've put up these dragon's teeth all around their border with Kaliningrad. In fact, they even did the same thing for a bridge to Russia's Kaliningrad region. So it's pretty clear they're very much spooked about what's going on. And Sweden announced a new military support package defending that's focused on defense needs in particular, material and procurement and financial. It includes some CB-90 assault boats, anti-aircraft missiles, anti-tank weapons, drones, etc. And that's the international situation right here. Let's go ahead and move right into the front lines here. There's a lot to kind of quickly go over, but we're really focused for a little bit. Ukrainians are fighting with one hand bound at their back, and yet they manage to keep an enemy at bay, which is superior in numbers and ammunition. You cannot overstate the amount of Ukrainian heroism. Now, this is as of 2 days ago, the situation in Donetsk and Kursk. He was comparing the amount of territory captured in each one. And he pointed out this one particular detail. Ukrainian forces still control around 10,100 square kilometers in the Donetsk region. If Russians keep that speed and no Ukrainian counteroffensive thwarts that plan, then it will take Russia around 8 years to take the whole Donetsk region. That's how effective Russia's military is right now. Here's the deep state map. I'm not going to do a lot of the detailed look at this one. Just kind of give you an overall look here. This is the area around Pokrovsk. And this area right here is Pokrovsk on the left side. And this is the changes from the last couple of days here. There was a pretty big push into this open area near Novelsky, and it's been confirmed that Russians have all of Novelsky in their control at this point. But other than that, you're not looking at a lot of changes, little tiny jumps. Hrodivka might be having some little trouble there. Over here in New York, you can see that this area is blue. There was kind of a weird encirclement looking thing going on here for a while, but the Ukrainians have decidedly taken this back. Now, Deep State Map has not updated the latest on Kursk. Things seem to kind of be slowing down in this region at this point. Still signs of things going on. Like, for instance, you'll see in a few moments here that Ukraine is keeping Glushkovo and Totkino here quite isolated by destroying all of the pontoon bridges across the same river here. So this area is going to continue to have things happen, just maybe not at the same pace that they had before. As Ozzy points out, and I kind of just skimmed over it, the Azov Brigade was sent to relieve the encircled troops in New York, and they succeeded. And that's exactly what happened. I've seen that from multiple other sources as well. Thank you, Ozzy. Keeping me honest. This is what I don't want to talk about that one anymore. This is the execution of prisoners. That's the reason why that the Russian prisoners of war no longer get to call home. Here's an interesting little bit from Russia here. A Russian mobilized man would put up a post stating that, and I'm going to give this a summary here, a new battalion commander was sent in and took over. And he said, we're going to put the mortars closer to the infantry. And that sounds good on the surface because, then you could have better communication between the infantry and the mortar teams. You could do more with that, get more range if they're closer together, etc. Until, a mortar team on the move is a lot easier to spot from a drone. So they started losing mortar teams like flies. And then when they got close to the infantry, now you have to actually supply those mortar teams with ammunition at the front lines where drones will see them coming. And so that came down to, they tried it with motorcycles and they couldn't do it. They tried it with trucks. They couldn't do it. They ended up having to have people carry artillery shells to the mortar teams. The most they could get moved that way was 6. And that's assuming that the guys carrying the stuff one at a time didn't get spotted as they did so. So this resulted in a lot of casualties. In fact, he said more casualties in 3 weeks than the previous 2.5 years. A Russian troop concentration made of 4 T-80 tanks and a fuel truck was also hit. This is in the Luhansk region here. They gathered together probably to get some fuel and take a little break, and the Ukrainians found them. The overall situation from War Gonzo generally confirms that he does say that there's a little bit more going on at Chasiv Yar that I've seen no other confirmation of. Krasnohorivka says that they're clearing more territory there. But overall, this kind of generally matches what I've mentioned elsewhere. The 110th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces has also been moved over to the Pokrovsk direction here, and they're methodically taking out Russian forces. This is amongst other factors. It looks like these are this is the reason why the advances in Pokrovsk went from huge and fast to almost nothing, almost overnight. Ukraine has clearly moved some reinforcements into the area, not just the Azov Brigade. So we probably won't see any more big changes in Pokrovsk, at least for a while. We'll have to watch this situation as we do so. They talked about Novelsky as well already, and the fall of Krasnohorivka. There's a possibility here that Ukrainian forces may be encircled in this area here. I think I might have something on this later, but we'll see at that point. Russian forces have made increased tactical gains around the city of Volodar, situated 30 kilometers southwest of Donetsk. Volodar has been a long-term target for Russian forces, which has acted as a linchpin against Russian advances in southern Donetsk. Russia has previously made repeated attempts to assault the town, which resulted in heavy losses, but with little territory gain. However, in August 2024, Russian forces made advances to the east and west of Volodar, taking control of the nearby villages of Prechestivka and contesting Vodiane. They do believe that it's likely that Russia will continue attempts to advance around Volodar and threaten the town itself. Here's the information on New York here. The 53rd Mechanized Brigade managed to recapture the center of New York after it was recently occupied by Russian forces. The advance of Ukrainian troops in this sector continues and has some additional success. So we'll be watching this with great interest. Now, this is the Novelsky area right here, and Knoll Reports kind of gave a quick analysis. There's not a whole lot in this number 2 zone here that to talk about. So they expect the Ukrainians to fall back into zone 3 here, where they have built a new line of defense. That's mostly open territory. There's a few little villages and things, but that is kind of going to hurt to give up that territory. Russian forces did manage to advance towards Toretsk along the main road. The area around the Toretsk Correctional Colony number 2 has been occupied by Russian forces, and an increased amount of Russian infantry presence in the area. This could be where they might be pulling forces from Pokrovsk so they can keep this area moving for a bit, kind of keep Ukraine tied up, moving things back and forth. There is the situation in Vodiane. The Ukrainians are saying that Russia hasn't got it. The Russians are saying they have. The Russians have advanced and occupied a coal mine in the area. Basically, a lot of fog of war right here. And a advance west of Peshin after forcing a breakthrough some weeks ago. And they're getting pretty close to the Oskil River. And if I remember right, this would be somewhere in this area right here. It's kind of getting a little bit active right here. You can see this little pseudopod extruding towards this area. So something to keep an eye on. And the Russians have managed to get a foothold on the western side of the Donbas Canal after occupying Kalinivka. heavy fighting in the area. So a lot to watch out for. But overall, a lot less territory is changing hands right now. So things seem to be at least somewhat stabilizing. Let's talk briefly about Kursk and kind of go through some of this stuff here. Now, I've looked at the bridge destruction videos several times. Some of them look almost like they could be like cluster munitions, but others don't seem like it to me. So I think it's probably a mixed set of ordnance being used. I don't know for sure what it is. I'd love to get an analysis on it. But the long story short is, if there's a pontoon bridge in the area, Ukraine knows about it and makes sure it goes away, just like that. Russians in the frontline settlements of the Kursk region are afraid to leave their homes as they may be looted by Russian soldiers. When asked why the military does not fight looting, one of the locals replied, "Good question. Are you not aware that it is soldiers who are doing the looting?" Here's some more confirmed gains by Ukrainian forces. This is as of 3 days ago. Several villages north of Malaya Luknaya have fallen to the Ukrainian advance. Some of them are new and some others are likely longer. Ukrainian forces, according to Tendar's map, control 1,150 square kilometers, but the Ukrainian army says they control 1,300, so not much to quibble over there. A Russian war correspondent has looked at the situation in the Kursk region and is shocked by the scale of economic losses that Russia is suffering. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled the region to save themselves, and this has a serious impact on businesses and even on neighboring regions. They are also kind of, doom posting again, panicking, because according to the Russians, the Ukrainians have brought in new reserves to Kursk to strengthen the second line of defense and deployed engineering troops for a potential offensive. Don't take it with too much, let me put it this way. When the Russians get posting like this, take it with a grain of salt. It might be true. It might not be true. You could see Ukraine suddenly advance 100 kilometers tomorrow, or you might see nothing happen. Take your pick. Sladkov also stated that Poles, German, French, and English are all taking part in the Kursk operation, but he never really explains why no foreign POWs were captured, and said that's the problem of the Russian Ministry of Defense. Well, it's also a problem because those people aren't there. I've mentioned this several times, that one of the advantages of taking some of the Kursk region is that Russian bombs would no longer be less of them would be targeting Ukrainian towns and cities, and more of them would be falling on Russia. And I was roundly mocked by other people saying, "No way, Russia wouldn't do that. They're gonna march in there. They're gonna wipe those Ukrainians out and take it all back. They're not going to be dropping bombs on Russian cities." Fresh footage from Sudza, Kursk zone, which is being destroyed by Russian glide bombs. More pontoon bridge footage here. I swear some of that looks really impressive. That one, good series of explosions. Chewy, tasty. Then there's this one here. Russians note a severe personnel shortage that prevents them from pushing out the forces in Kursk zone and implementing further offensive plans in Donetsk Oblast. The risk of additional incursions remains. Too often we see people saying, "Oh, the Russians have no problems getting more people to come." And yet they've had to keep ramping up the dollar signs, or ruble signs, I guess, to get people to sign up for the special military operation. So anybody who says, "Oh, Russia doesn't have any real personnel issues," they can easily just scare up some more troops. There's some real shortages. And a conscript right off the street, a person who's just signed his name on the line, is not going to be effective like a soldier with a year or two of training or experience under his belt. A lot of stuff about Kursk here kind of kept it moving along. Russians shot down a Russian Shahed drone in the Kursk zone. That was pretty funny. More bridges being destroyed. I love those bridge videos. They're so much fun. Then, of course, there's this bit between Russian propagandists. When will we finally liberate our Kursk region? And the answer? Why? Even the Russians don't care about Russia. Why would they focus on taking Kursk back when they can steal more Ukrainian land, which is better land and better everything? Sad. There were a couple of adjustments to the map made in favor of Russia on Knoll Report's map. They do believe that Ukraine was pushed back from the Korenivo settlement, not the city, and Russia restored some of their positions south of Kachuk. But overall, again, this appears to be just more small bits of information. And that's pretty much the situation on the front lines. Overall, we're seeing progress for Ukraine. We're seeing a little bit of progress for Russia. It's pretty crazy out there. I'm ready to roll into the interesting extras here. This is a bunch of Russians near Sochi, Russia. If you haven't seen tourists casually rolling a sea mine over the beach, now you have. Now, there is potentially a caveat to this. Somebody claimed that it was, in fact, a dummy mine used to mark the beach area. Why would you mark your beach area with a dummy mine? But I digress. Either way, this does not look like the work of brilliance. Al states, remember the Soviet Union population was never really recovered from World War II. Furthermore, the end of the Cold War had a huge exodus from the former Soviet states since. Makes sense for the shortage. Absolutely. A lot of things going on with the demographics in Russia right now. Aussies all over it. Demographic collapse, extreme low fertility rate, plus an average life expectancy of the mid-60s. It's true. The European Union has around 500 million people in it. Russia's got around 140 million people. If Europe just got off their duffs, they would outnumber Russian forces 3-1. Just saying. The key to victory for Ukraine is not in the amount of money, equipment, or ammo we give them. It's in our commitment to actually giving them all they need to defeat Russia and restore Ukrainian sovereignty. That's in the best interest of the West. That is from Ben Hodges, former U.S. Army Europe. So there you go. That's really the long story short. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring the sound back up here. Let me pause this. Bloop. And bloop. Let's go ahead and hear what what they have to say here. I believe that's.
I'm here with President Zelensky. I am such a admirer of what you and your country have done. You're trying to stop the Russians so we don't have to fight them. They don't want any American troops. They just need the weapons to free their country of a terrible invasion. They're sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals that could be good to our economy. So I want to keep helping our friends in Ukraine. We can win this. They need our help.
Yes, we need, and we have already, the biggest help is the support of American people and support of our friends, thanks to Lindsay and his colleagues, to congressmen and senators from the United States. Thanks for this support, bipartisan support. Thank you so much.
Peace is coming.
Yes, soon.
I'm here.
I have to admit, that is a lot of confidence there. Peace is coming soon. How about this short story of a Russian armored vehicle? It was penetrated by a Ukrainian shell. The vehicle, however, remained intact. They washed the crew out with a hose. Not a whole lot of armor there. So, as Tindar states, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. A little bit of a personal moment here for fighters of the 2nd Air Assault Battalion of the 95th Air Assault Brigade in the Tourette's direction. Tired, but unbroken. This Russian Bakanka truck was drove over a TM-62 mine. It pretty much laid the whole thing out flat and scattered pieces all over creation. This is what Russia's using to resupply their troops, is these trucks, and there's no protection in those. How about a Ukrainian Mi-8 HIP helicopter that has landed in a sunflower field? Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And in fact, there's even a T-84 MBT that's rolling through a sunflower field as well. Just some fun pictures there. And this one here, I'm going to go ahead and get the audios back on again. This is what we're fighting for.
Обіцяли прийти, як розквітне в садочку весна. Тату, тату, татусю, як хочу я вас обійняти, задрімати в обіймах, забути тривогу і страх. По підвалах сестричкою вже надоїло ховатись. Нехай вас і все військо боронить Господь небеса. Вчора мама мене одягнула в нову вишиванку, розцвіла вишиванками знову вся школа моя. А по ваших позиціях ворог б'є без перестанку. Знаю точно, що ви стоїте, бо за вами є я. Тату, тату, татусю, як хочу я вас обійняти.
That's what they're really fighting for over there. Their children, their future. After all, if you don't have a future, what do you have? And some things are worth fighting for. Moving over to politics for just a moment or two, and then we'll get into a little bit of cute animal stuff. Actually, I got a couple of things I'm going to do right before I do that. But Donald Trump has revealed how he will end the war in Ukraine. His plan is to cut energy prices by half or more within 12 months of taking office. Putin cannot fight with oil at $40 a barrel. And he says that he will make a deal within 24 hours. So what's the point of cutting the cost of oil within 12 months? I don't know. I've given up on understanding this. In the end, though, it's believed that his plans would require Ukraine to give up some of its territory. Now, before I go into the rest of the interesting extras here, I'm going to leave this cow that's up here for a moment or two with a very inconveniently placed fire behind it. I'm going to quickly go through, and I've got a bunch, when I'm kind of browsing things as I go about my day, I pick up so much. I'm going to quickly go through those things just right here on my phone. So, from Mark Hertling, on a daily basis during my time in command of army forces in Europe, every day the intelligence black book would provide more information on Putin's Russian attempts to malign influence against the West, and especially against the United States. During my service in Europe, I saw intelligence on Russian acts of sabotage within allied governments, the creation of frozen conflicts within the territorial integrity of nations, including Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, 2 of the 3 Baltic countries, and the Balkans. The stoking and support of migration and human trafficking, malicious cyber activities against the whole of governments, disinformation campaigns and election interference, attempted and successful assassinations on foreign soil. In the last year of command of U.S. Army Europe Armed Forces in 2012, the Russian television station Russia Today asked me to do an interview as we had just conducted an exercise with the Russian army, and I had invited the chief of the Russian ground forces, Colonel General Churkin, to a conference. Even with my public affairs officer nearby, the journalist of Russia Today attempted to use that live video — I would not do a pre-recorded one — to spread dis, and malinformation regarding the exercise and Churkin's presence. It is no wonder that Russia Today is part of the Justice Department report that we mentioned earlier under the paid assets bit when we started, as they have only become bolder through the years. And Mr. Hertling's commentary here goes for quite a bit here. Understand that he's seen Russia expand these operations constantly. Then there was this one here, and I apologize. I wish I had this one up so I could play it for you. This was Poland's President Duda stating something. If it happens that Russian forces are leaving Ukraine, I'll be the first to call Zelensky and ask him not to bomb them and just let them go home instead, leave them be. And President Zelensky, who was in the press conference with Duda, said, "But what if my phone line is busy?" Oh, gee. So a lot of things that can be said about the situation here. I mentioned, I think, a while back, Switzerland is looking at ending 500 years of neutrality because of the Russian threat. I mean, there's just so much that just kind of pick up right here. I'm going to save that one for later when I can actually bring it up, because that's too good to do by itself. From Gary Kasparov, the former Russian chess grandmaster, the only peace will be Russia losing and leaving Ukraine. Everything else, summit, ceasefire, etc., is a sham. So Scholz, talking about German Chancellor Scholz, and the rest can pretend to be big peacemakers, while Russia says thanks and rearms for its next offensive. That is the pattern that Russia does. It's constant. It's everywhere. They fight for a while. They get a peace agreement. They rebuild, and they return stronger. Russians seem to have created a new form of currency measurement. You've heard of like the Big Mac index. Well, Russians have taken up the Mavic drone index, in that anytime there's a new, like, construction of a new metro station in Moscow, they talk about how much that cost and how many Mavic drones they could have bought with that money. Clearly, they're pointing out that there is a lot of hypocrisy going on in Russia. Okay, this one right here. I'm going to try to show it to the camera here. In fact, just give me a second here. Boop. You should be able to see it pretty good once I get this up here. If you can see that picture right there, get that a little closer. That picture is a Russian propaganda poster talking about supporting their men in Ukraine. And what you have to do with that shows a soldier carrying a child. That picture is a Ukrainian soldier with a child. Even when Russia has to do their own propaganda, they manage to screw it up, because apparently they can't find any Russian soldiers that are saving children. Only Ukrainian ones. And from Dmitry at War Translated, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, 11,000 Ukrainian soldiers have already been killed in Kursk. This is 1,000 less than the total contingent figure announced by Opti Aladanov. Thus, there are no more Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk. Once again, Russia likes to, let's just say, make it propagandize their numbers. And that's kind of all the things that I've got just kind of sitting on my phone that I wanted to talk about real quick. I'll end off with just a couple of quick pictures like this cow right here. The fire behind it is not coming out of his backside, but it sure looks like it is. And of course, Crimean Wind talks about the elections in Russia being a circus. But just the picture made me laugh, so I thought I'd share it with you. And finally, if you're trying to sleep in on Sunday, don't try and interrupt your buddy. They might just bite you and make you hold still. Super cute. I love cat videos and things like that. And that is everything for today. Slopaganda is an amazing word, Aussie. I love it. Let's see, quickly, real quick here. I'm scanning the comments here. Aussie earlier said, every man sent to the front is a job not being done. I heard power company employers were heavily recruited, leaving shortage of trained men behind lines. Absolutely true. And we're seeing that Russia's already got a huge labor shortage, which is causing wages to rise, skyrocket even, inflating the overall economy there. By stealing your trained professionals, you no longer are able to actually do those jobs in the back, in the rear areas. And we're seeing it happen. Firefighters were another one. Aussie does recommend watching the 2018 documentary Active Measures, especially if you're an American. Follow the money. Not familiar? I'll take a look. And on that note, I think that's everything for today. Thank you again for joining me. I do appreciate you guys being here. If you're still here, go ahead and hit me with that thumbs up, because obviously you're here for the whole thing. And I know all of you here that I know of are subscribed. So if any latecomers join in and want to make sure they know when I'm going to do one of these live streams, absolutely subscribe to the channel. It also tells YouTube, hey, I do pretty good stuff. I do my best work here at times, even with limited amounts of time available. And I want you to know that in the end, though, it's you guys that make the difference. Thanks again. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.